Questions and comments? Question commentaire. The Honourable Member for Vancouver Centre.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to stand up and say how pleased I am to see the strong support of parliamentarians across the political spectrum for this particular bill. As a physician, I am very familiar with violence of all kinds, both workplace, domestic, and societal violence. Because of the fear and the stigma and the shame that is associated with violence, most people don't go and talk to anybody, but they feel safe to come and talk to their physician. So I was always a repository of all of this information and knowledge, sometimes unable to do very much about it, except to advise the patient about what to do. Today, we see full disclosure. Everyone is disclosing now, and because of that full disclosure, some people feel very safe in joining the ranks and joining the throng so that they aren't singled out as being specific. But it doesn't mean that the shame has gone, and it doesn't mean that the stigma has not gone, and it doesn't mean that blaming the victim has gone away. And so it's not enough to talk about the issue. We've got to do something concrete, and who else can do something concrete about this other than this place, this Parliament, where we make laws and where we create policies and we create programs that will deal with the issue once and for all. And so what I believe that this bill is doing is it's creating, albeit some people think that it should be amended, et cetera, et cetera. The point is this bill is a first step to keep the promise that the Liberal government made when it first came into power, that it would deal exactly with this particular workplace harassment and this particular culture in the workplace. And so I think we need to look at this. I know people have spoken about different types of harassment and violence, but I want to say that violence is not just physical, and it's not only sexual. Psychological violence is rampant in the workplace, where people do things and don't do things and don't say things because of fear of losing their job or of losing a promotion or of reprisals by the people who are in authority within the workplace. So I think we need to really look at a full and comprehensive spectrum of violence. So psychological violence is as important and as damning as actual physical violence. And there's a great deal of psychological violence in the workplace. And so we need to take concrete steps, actually, to change the culture of the workplace and to look at how this bill is going to do that, because I think this bill will do that. And if we pass this bill in the House and we bring in the policies and the programs that will support this bill, I think we will see a slow but definite change in the culture of workplace, or at least of the federal workplace, of the Parliament as a workplace, and of course of federally regulated workplaces. And so I think there are three areas we need to look at. As always, protection is the most important thing. As a physician, I can say, I can treat your disease, I can help you, I can put Band-Aids, I can do what I need to do. But if I don't look at the cause, I don't get at those root causes, then I'm not able to give you long-term help and long-term support. And so we need to look at the culture. This culture is not 150 years old. The culture of this abuse of authority and of making people afraid in order to do what you want them to do, this has gone on for millennia. This is a culture that's so deeply ingrained that it's going to be very difficult to remove it. But with goodwill, we can all start to do it. The first thing we need to do, Mr. Speaker, is examine ourselves. What do we do? How do we think? How do we behave? What are the thoughtless things we do to our own staff when we are angry at them or we felt they didn't do the job well? What are the things that we do, both as men and as women, that make our colleagues feel ashamed and feel threatened, whether it's physically, psychologically, or in fact sexually? And so I think those are the things we need to first do. Before we can do anything, we've got to be physician heal thyself. We've got to look at our own behavior. And we've got to look at how we pass on information to our children, how we bring up children who learn to respect each other, to understand the way to behave with each other. These are the fundamental things we've got to begin. It begins in kindergarten. Because if we continue with the culture that we have here, I mean, we can talk about, I've heard people talk about pornography, etc. That culture starts at the beginning of one's lives. How we deal with each other from the very beginning. How we talk about each other at home, around the dinner table. how we shame people, how we denigrate people. Those are some of the things that we have to start examining. But in fact, what we need is a legislation here. And this legislation will do one thing. It will look at how we actually protect people from workplace violence. And one of the things to do is to have employers, require them, not just suggest, but require them to investigate, record, and report incidents. That's the first thing. And to also look at how we have a toll-free line. There's going to be labor programs that will bring in a toll-free line for employees and employers to link with experts who can help them go through conflict resolution, go through negotiations, and navigate all of the processes. We need to look at educational materials, which this is providing in this bill, guidelines that will help to deal with support services and provide support services for those who are victims. Keeping in mind, foremost and always, the safety of the complainant. And the safety of the complainant is really very much of a problem. I think we know that, in fact, fear of reprisal is a big one, losing your job, being demoted, not getting that promotion that you thought you would get, not getting that big part in that movie that you wanted to get. Some of these things are very real, and some of these things people need to feel that they're not going to be blackballed for the rest of their lives because they spoke out. And so that is going to be very important as we look at the protection component. The next one is to look at effectiveness. How do we, in fact, have effective ways of dealing with this? How do we support victims? How to deal with it effectively immediately, how to deal with a problem when it occurs, and how to support the victims themselves. That's a big part of that effective response. And, you know, I wanted to say that even though I stand here as a woman and as a longtime feminist, I want to say that this is not only about gender harassment. Indeed, there are men who are harassed in the workplace, either psychologically or physically. And in fact, men are more at risk of physical violence in the workplace. And again, when we look at that, we see 19% of women have a tendency to seek help, to go to report, to look for support services. Only 7% of men do that because of the absolute shame that a man has of being in this position. So I want us to look at the broad ways in which we can deal with this problem, at both gender, at all of the ways in which we can keep people down. And therefore, if because of this bill, a lot of men are going to seek help, then this will actually help them to be able to get the help that they need. The third pillar, of course, is to support the employees who are affected. Now, I just wanted to say that this legislation does not replace criminal code. There are going to be times when, in fact, we need to look at going to enforcement because of the very criminality of an act that occurred in the workplace. So this does not replace that. And but it will bring into force Section 3 of the PESRA Act, which is the Employer and Staff Relations Act, that in fact will bring in health and safety precautions in the workplace and protections in the workplace. Mr. Speaker, I caution everyone in this House not to think that we will turn on a dime, not to think that we will make changes. But if right now, by passing this legislation, if right now, by the ability of all of us in this place to think that this is extremely important enough to come together and to forget our differences, then what we're going to do is we're going to make it safer for people to feel they can speak out. And we're going to make it safer for people to be protected when they speak out. And I think if we just do that, that will be one major step in moving this agenda forward. But we do need to have clear guidelines, clear policies. This bill is going to do exactly that. So we're not just talking, we're not just tut-tutting and saying how terrible things are. We're actually put into place concrete processes, concrete steps, and concrete sanctions that will affect employers and employees in the workplace. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments?